I'm Christie Fletcher. I'm the worship director at Desert Foothills Church. And thank you so much for joining me today for another episode of Music Notes, where I just kind of take you behind the scenes on the story behind some of my favorite hymns, get to know the composer and the lyricist a little bit more, and understand the meaning of the hymns. In synopsis, the first episode we spoke about Thy Strong Word, and for me it's one of my favorites specifically because of the dramatic tune that we have. It's in a minor key and it marries so well with the words that Martin Franzmann wrote, and between the words and the drama of the music, it's just an exceptional hymn for me. Then last week we talked about When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. Now for me, what draws me to that tune is just the beautiful poem. It's just a poetry, and it was set to music that had already been written. It was a Gregorian chant, and then that was taken to the next level. But for me, it was all about the words. And this week, I've chosen a hymn, not exactly for either one of those reasons. A lot of us are drawn to a hymn because of a personal experience or fond memory that we have associated with that particular hymn. And that's what did it for me this week. So before I go any further, I would like for you to take a listen and see if this rings a bell. Could you figure that out? Well, maybe you think it's one of my favorite hymns because it says, I sing because I'm happy, I sing because I'm free, and I love to sing, so it fits me perfectly. But no, it is His Eye is on the Sparrow. When you were listening to that, did you feel like you had just walked into a Disney movie, maybe Snow White? It's kind of around the same time period. But that is His Eye is on the Sparrow, and what you just heard was a little bit of the chorus. So for me, this hymn is very important because I associate this hymn with someone that many of you are probably familiar with him. His name is Bob Jones Sr., and he was a member of Desert Foothills Lutheran Church for many, many years, a beloved friend to everyone at church as well as to my family, and this was one of his favorite hymns. Now, Bob exemplified a strong faith, and he was a very humble man, very kind, a giving heart, and in his later years, he really struggled with a lot of health problems. But through it all, his faith never ever wavered. As a matter of fact, it just became more strong. And my husband and I had a strong connection with Bob and his wife, Ollie. And so our two families would get together, and it was just a really great relationship and experience for my husband and I to spend time with Bob and Ollie. So when I think of this song now, I think of Bob singing it in heaven with me, and he is now free of all the worldly afflictions that he had. So interestingly enough, I mentioned my husband and I had a relationship with Bob and Ollie, and that is what helped me love this song. It's kind of a similar story about the reason the song was even written to begin with. It came about because of a relationship between two couples. The author of this hymn, her name is Sevilla D. Martin. She is a Canadian lady, and she was educated in Nova Scotia. And she taught school for a short time before meeting her husband, and his name is Dr. William Martin, and he was an evangelist and a musician of sorts, and together they enjoyed a ministry and traveled around, and Sevilla wrote the lyrics to this hymn, and they came about through an inspiration, and I would like to read you her exact words about that experience. Sevilla writes, "Early in the spring of 1905, my husband and I were sojourning in Elmira, New York. We contracted a deep friendship for a couple by the name of Mr. and Mrs. Doolittle, true saints of God. Mrs. Doolittle had been bedridden for nigh 20 years. Her husband was an incurable cripple who had to propel himself to and from his business in a wheelchair. Despite their afflictions, they lived happy Christian lives, bringing inspiration and comfort to all who knew them. One day, while we were visiting with the Doolittles, my husband commented on their bright hopefulness and asked them for the secret of it. Mrs. Doolittle's reply was simple. 'His eye is on the sparrow, for I know he watches me.' The beauty of this simple expression of boundless faith gripped the hearts and fired the imagination of Dr. Martin and me. The hymn, 'His eye is on the sparrow,' was the outcome of that experience." So those were Sevilla's own words. And again, she just had this relationship with the other couple and was just so inspired by their faith through hard times and through all of their afflictions that she was just so moved. And now that tune that she wrote is also inspired by Scripture. So specifically in Psalms, the 32nd Psalm, and verse 8, "I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way that you should go. I will guide you with mine eye." And also I flip to, Matthew. "Look at the birds flying around. They do not plant seeds, gather a harvest, and put in the barns. Yet your Father in heaven takes care of them. Aren't you worth more than the birds?" And then I flip to, Matthew 10, chapter 10, verse 29. "For only a penny can buy you 2 sparrows, yet not one sparrow falls to the ground without your Father's consent." And then finally, I'll flip to Luke. "Even the hairs of your head have all been counted, so do not be afraid. You are worth much more than many sparrows." So with that, we know, as did Sevilla and also Mrs. Doolittle, God is watching over the sparrows. God is most certainly watching over us. So very inspiring. So after she wrote the poem, her husband, I mentioned he was a musician of sorts. He tried to write some music, and neither Sevilla or Dr. Martin were happy with what he was able to come up with. And so Sevilla sent her lyrics to Charles H. Gabriel, and he was an experienced musician and songwriter, and she asked him to please write some fitting lyrics. So much like with When I Survey the Wondrous Cross, the lyrics came first as a poem, and then it was set to music. And Gabriel's music is beautiful. It's dancing, it's whimsical melody, and it does really fit the tune. What I like about it, it is in 6/8 time, or 3/4 time. What I mean by that is it is 1 2 3 2 2 3 1 2 3 2 2 3, which is a waltz. So grab your husband or wife right now and you can waltz around the living room. "I sing because I'm happy. 1 2 3, sing because I'm free." So it's a beautiful dancing song, just like the birds flying in the sky. So Gabriel came up with a really good melody for the words that he was given. Now, a little bit about Charles Hutchinson Gabriel. He was born in 1856 and he lived to 1932. And he was a writer of gospel songs and gospel tunes. So gospel songs they're not necessarily published in the main hymnals that are used in denominational worship. So when you open your Lutheran hymnal, you're not going to find His Eye is on the Sparrow there. Actually, I didn't even know that His Eye is on the Sparrow is considered a gospel song, but indeed it is. So today I'm going to leave you with a sound clip of Ethel Waters singing His Eye is on the Sparrow. Now, a little bit about her. She was born in 1896 and was a legendary African-American singer, actress, and entertainer. And she began her career as a jazz singer, and she went on to star on Broadway stages, as well as in the movie The Member of the Wedding, which is where His Eye is on the Sparrow is sung, and also Mamba's Daughters, and both of those were very relevant and successful in their time. However, despite her success, Ethel led a life full of just struggles and strife, a lot of pain, quite literally from the moment she was conceived. So she's a very interesting person and worth looking up. That's Ethel Waters. In 1957, she sang at her first Billy Graham crusade in New York's Madison Square Garden. And years later, she gave this testimony of that night. She said, "In 1957, I, Ethel Waters, a 380-pound decrepit old lady, rededicated my life to Jesus Christ. And boy, because He lives, just look at me now. I tell you, because He lives, and because my precious child, Billy Graham, gave me the opportunity to stand there, I can thank God for the chance to tell you His eye is on all of us sparrows." So in her later years, Waters often toured with Billy Graham on his crusades, singing His Eye is on the Sparrow. And that song has touched millions of hearts worldwide. So let's listen to her now.
So why should I feel discouraged? Or why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely? Away from heaven and home, when Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. So I sing, because I'm happy. Oh yes, I sing, because I'm free. I know, and how I know that He watches. We